I'm James Whitford. I'm the Executive Director at Water Gardens Gospel Rescue Mission. I'm glad that you're here tonight. I'm very excited about what we will consider and learn over the next 2 days, tonight and then tomorrow morning. And let me just read a letter that some of you received that I had sent out. Certainly the time has come. For years, our federal government has added about $1 trillion in debt annually. $6 billion of that is spent every month on food stamps alone. We all know that the current welfare system is untenable and unsustainable. While our country continues a methodic march towards socialism, the entitlement trap tightens on the poor, causing greater dependency and oppression. We see this lifelessness in the eyes of people every day at our mission, the result of an endless chase for government handouts. Ministries like mine and many others struggle as we attempt to provide accountability and challenges to personal growth, but with limited success in light of a growing system of welfare, a system that is propagated by a lack of any intrinsic incentive to actualize real solutions. Poverty is cured from within, and the church is the vehicle to deliver the cure. Now is the time for a grassroots movement of community leaders to launch an initiative to provide just and effective alternatives to state welfare. Welcome to the True Charity Initiative Leadership Forum. Tonight, we'll talk about the problem. The idea is that we need to look this evening at how did we get here? What went wrong? Tomorrow will be more of how do we fix this? What strategy? Now, some of that will be how do we need to think differently than the way we've been thinking? We might actually get a little bit of on-the-ground strategic ideas tomorrow, but certainly the way we've been thinking has got to change as well. I want to make sure everybody's got a folder. If you don't have a folder, please make sure you pick one up. Outside, there are a note section in there for you to jot down notes. Please do. Record your thoughts. Tomorrow we'll have a significant amount of time to discuss, and so please record your thoughts in your notes. And there's a call to action. If you think that you've come to simply an event, you're mistaken. This is a launching pad. I don't like events. I like to accomplish things. This is a launching pad to accomplish something in our future. So please make note that there is a call to action sheet in your folder. Tonight, you'll have an opportunity to ask a question or two of the speaker after they conclude. So we'll have 4 speakers tonight. We'll have 4 tomorrow. The topics are different. Tomorrow, we won't do that. Tomorrow, we'll simply roll right through the presentations, and we'll have a time of discussion, question, and answer in conclusion tomorrow morning at about 11:15. That's my guess. Well, I wanted to give you a little bit of history because I began asking how is it that we've gotten here? How is it that I've gotten here? I remember when it all started for me personally. It was 15 years ago. I was in the upstairs of a homeless mission in inner city Fort Worth, and a truckload of clothing had been donated, and the clothing was strewn all over the pews, waiting for me and some other people to sort through it, fold it so it could be distributed to the poor at a later time. And I was distracted. I was by a window, and I was distracted by some homeless that were meandering on the street below. And I don't know why it was, but at that particular moment, my heart was apprehended. I was gripped by something so much more than pity or sympathy for these people that I was looking at. It seemed to be the very compassion of God. I remember feeling a deep longing for the poor, a longing that went beyond helping the poor to being with them. And it compelled me to stretch forward my hand and put it on the glass of the window, as if there was just a desire to reach out and touch. And for whatever reason, at that point, I literally broke. I ached and wept, as if I ached and wept with God. And I have never been the same since. So it was a hard moment, but a beautiful moment. And it was 3 years after that, that in the very same room, in the same mission in Fort Worth, that I married my bride, Marcia. And then 3 months after that, we started this small little outreach in Joplin called Watered Gardens. Compelled by a heart for Christ's ministry to the hungry, the sick, the poor, and the elderly, we opened it with great faith, much excitement and compassion, and in no less quantity, naivety. Yeah. For three years at least, maybe 4. We met many needs of the poor in the community and often scratched our heads as we wondered why it was that our great Christian love was not somehow solving the issues of poverty in people's lives or relieving them of addiction or other interrelated social ills. We were forced to ask ourselves the question, are we really helping the poor? It was near that time that we began understanding more about the cyclic patterns of dependency, that human nature, in absence of Christ's Spirit, will take the path of least resistance, which is rarely one that is upright and moral. At that time, the path of least resistance, for many, was a route that led from agency to agency, with the primary objective of subsisting while exerting the least amount of effort necessary. It reminded me of a story that I've told before, but there was a man, I wasn't at the mission on this particular day, but it would have been about this season of time where we're really scratching our heads, kind of banging our heads up against the wall. What are we doing here? Are we really helping people? And this man walked in, and he had on a neck brace. It was a cervical soft collar. And he walked in, and he walked right up to the desk where my wife was sitting. And he looked down the best that he could, and he said, "Hi, I need some help." And she kindly responded, "Sure, what can we do for you?" And he began to tell his story by saying, "Well, I've broken my neck, and I'm paralyzed from the neck down." Yeah. Now, I don't remember the rest of what it was that he needed. It was an interesting ploy, to say the least. But it's an example. I actually thought of that story while I was reading a book recently called The Tragedy of American Compassion by Marvin Olasky. And in it, he quotes a writer, Charles Brace, from the mid-19th century. And this is what Charles Brace has to say. "The number of poor people who enjoy a comfortable living derived from a long study and experience of those various agencies of benevolence would be incredible to anyone not familiar with the facts. They pass from one to the other, knowing exactly their condition of assistance and meeting their requirements, and live thus by a sort of science of alms." Well, in an effort to try to thwart that, I launched a web-based networking tool through our local ministerial alliance that effectively tracks recipients of charity within the benevolent community. With tens of thousands of people recorded in it and more than 50 churches, charities, and organizations using it, success in really helping the poor seemed closer than ever. We developed a curriculum designed to inspire the poor to dream, to plan, to set goals, and then we scheduled the class. And as a community, we required attendance as we began to withdraw support from those who were red flagged as either abusers or radically dependent, one or the other. We anticipated great results from our new ability to increase accountability and apply challenges to develop character. However, the mandated class had high attrition and soon low initial attendance. Why? Well, the story of Dave will help us answer the question. David was a homeless man who'd been red flagged in our system and had neglected to attend the class that we required. He showed up at my office angry because other organizations in the network weren't willing to help him with food. Graciously, I offered an opportunity for him to work at the mission to earn a food voucher for a food basket, to which he angrily responded, Why should I have to work for my food? Now, he was serious. Not 2 weeks passed from that point before a food stamp card arrived in the mail for him. And it was a year later that I found him nearly dead in the woods with a vodka bottle in his hand. So let me speak for just a minute about food stamps, because David represents just one of 1 million people in the state of Missouri who are currently using them. So we'll just take a look at a few slides here. This just shows average monthly caseload of food stamps from 2006 to 2010. That's a 33% increase. Caseload. Interestingly, the dollars dispersed in food stamps through the same amount of time is an 83% increase. So some things are not adding up there. So this is a sliding scale that basically shows if you're not making anything, this is how much you would receive in food stamps per person in your family. Well, I thought this was interesting because that number right there was the size of my family, which is almost, not quite, but almost twice as much as what we budgeted to spend in raising our kids. So that's just quite a bit. And hence might explain some of the 83% that we saw an increase. Here's another graph that just shows from February of 07 to February of 12, 5 years again, you're seeing a $60 million per month and going from $60 million per month to $120 million per month in 5 years. So 100% increase in food stamp use. Is that in Jasper County? This is state of Missouri. Yeah, that's the state of Missouri. $60 million per month in the state of Missouri in February of 2007, February of 2012, $60 million in that particular, $120 million in that particular month right there, and a sharp increase around the 08-09 transition. I don't think that's because people got hungrier. So the question is it really helping? Some of those dollars go to John. John would admit to you he's an addict. He's been living on the streets for years. Because we're close to John and we know that giving things to John is not really necessarily the way to help him. In fact, it might hurt him. So John's not able to receive any services from our organization unless he works for them. But the state doesn't feel that way. In this video, which we don't have time to watch, but I'll tell you that he admits receiving more than $180 a month in food stamps. And then he also goes on to admit that he doesn't really need them. And he describes how easily that they're sold for 50 cents on the dollar. Single mother Rebecca describes in detail the personal shopper method where the buyer fills the cart with food and then the seller checks out with her EBT card, and then they just step outside the front doors of the store and swap food for cash. And Dennis, who was in our missions program, shares the details of a daycare that purchases stamps 50 cents on the dollar to buy food for kids, but charges the parents at full price. Dennis returned his card after hearing me share that in Jasper County alone, every month more than $2.5 million are spent in food stamps. Sadly, when he returned the card, he was told that he needed to complete paperwork first, which he declined doing. And I thought we'd just listen to a little bit of Dennis real quick. $0.50 on the dollar, and when you say warehouse, you just like that particular place?
There's people know about people that live over there, and they'll buy, if someone has $200 in the food stamps, they'll give them a $100 bill, they'll take the food stamp card and the PIN number, and they'll go and they'll use that, and they come back. Now, the lady of this owns a child care facility, and she uses that $200 to buy grocery monies for the children at the daycare. That way when the parents come in and pay the lady, she's putting all the money in her pocket, but yet all the food she's getting, the state's buying. Well, we're buying, because the money actually comes from our pockets.
I see. So she has almost a regular clientele.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I used to be one of them.
Oh, okay.
When I was on the food stamps.
Okay.
For like 1 month, and I felt guilty for doing it.
Yeah.
So I didn't do it anymore.
Yeah. So tell me, when you got on food stamps, how did that go? I mean, was that...
Oh, that was so simple.
It was?
Oh, yeah. I walked in, and all you got to have to do is, whatever state you're in, you got to have identification for that state. And you walk in and say, man, I'm hungry. I live on the streets. I live in a tent. It took me, James, seriously, it took me not even 15 minutes. They even filled out the application for me.
They filled it out for you?
Yeah, all I do is sign my name.
So it's a pretty quick process.
Yeah, but to get off of them, this lady was talking about, well, if you want to wait out here when I'm done with this person, I like, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, you can't just hand in your card and tell me you're done. I said, yes, I can. And she goes, no, sir, you just paperwork you got to fill out. Why do you want me to fill out paper to tell you that I'm not wanting food stamps no more? Why can't you just take the card straight and let me go?
So how long were you on it before you tried to return the card?
2 months.
Okay. And then you admittedly had abused some of that.
Yeah, my first month.
Then you felt like, well, I don't even need this. Is that right?
Well, right before I came in here, I
Okay.
heard you talking how much money just in this county, was it?
It was in
The amount of money
Jasper
that's
County, 1
been
month.
used in food stamps. I'm like, man, that could build one of their schools here.
Yeah, right.
You know, and
Yeah.
here the board, or some people all fighting for all this money to build a school. Well, there goes the money.
Yeah. That's very good, Dennis. So you remember the figure?
Oh, it was in the millions.
Yeah, $2.5 million for 1 month in Jasper
1
County.
month?
Yeah.
That's $200.
So, yes,
Divide that up
that's a
by how
lot.
many people.
Oh yeah. So you were feeling after that you then wanted to return your food stamp card?
Yeah, I went up and dropped it on her counter.
That's
Well, my point is that they got all these people that they're paying to sit in office and to get people on food stamps.
yeah.
But to get off food stamps, they do the same thing. You got to
Yeah.
go up and sit behind the people behind the desk, and they got to
Right.
get you off.
They want to make it difficult.
Listen to the aha moment here. He realizes some things.
So they're making money by us being on food stamps. So maybe that $2 million that was supposed to be spent on food stamps, was that spent on food stamps alone, or was that also spent for the employment of people, putting people on food stamps?
No, it wasn't. There's more cost involved with that.
Oh, and we're in debt. Why?
Isn't that a beautiful moment? It's like he's realizing the expense of bureaucracy for the first time, and he's just like, wow. So, love Dennis very much. Here's, let's see, let me get back to the... let's see. What am I missing here? Oh, okay, right here. There we go. Okay, this is a picture of a cardboard sign that one homeless man named Kenny was holding on the roadside. It reflects the apparent acceptance of such a practice. Can you imagine that? Driving by and seeing somebody, not will work for food, but I've got food stamps, I'll sell you half price. One homeless man came up to me and he said, Pastor James, he called me. He said, Pastor James, I don't understand this. I just went down to the office down there and I said, I'm hungry, I need some help with food. And they gave me this card and these instructions, and I don't really understand the instructions. And I said, well, okay, I don't know. I've never seen it. Let me read it. And I just began to read it. I'll read it to you. It says, buy food using your food stamp benefits. Buy food using your temporary assistance cash benefits. Buy non-food items using your temporary assistance cash benefits. Buy something and get cash at the same time using your temporary assistance cash benefits, or get cash without buying anything using your temporary assistance cash benefits. So, and of course this man was just looking for some help with some food. Michael struggled with alcoholism. He lived in our mission for about 30 days, was sober and clean, and his friend revealed to us, his best friend, that he had received a food stamp card, and then he left the mission, sold it for half price, and bought alcohol, and the next time I saw him was laying in an alley drunk with emergency personnel performing CPR on him, and he died days later. Food stamps are a quickly attainable resource, easily liquidated for cash, and often hurt those we want to help by enabling them to avoid personal responsibility, accountability, and character-building challenges. Attempts to open doors of communication between our local food stamp office and our charity network have been unsuccessful, as have conversations with the Division of Social Services Director in Jefferson City. However, it's the very lack of communication between a state office that's in our community and the churches and charities of the community that are tied to the rampant abuse that we see in the food stamp system. For there is no way to verify if a client is requesting food, to verify if a client requesting food from our network is currently on the food stamp roll or not. Yet our Joplin network of churches and charities boasts more than 15,000 food assistance records in the last year alone, and should be afforded the ability to verify if one of their clients is receiving food stamps or not. But hear me this evening. The dream is not to verify if a person is on food stamps or not. The dream is to feed our own. I dream of a community that feeds its own. And it's a dream rooted in love for the poor and a belief that his poverty is more a symptom of a broken system than it is of his own inability. It's rooted in a faith that God can draw a community together, a community like Joplin, to model true and effective charity. The True Charity Initiative is not anti-government. We need good government. We need good rule of law. The True Charity Initiative is not about creating an environment where hunger serves to motivate, although hunger does motivate. Neither is the initiative exclusive to a political party or a particular denomination. True Charity Initiative is a grassroots movement by people who believe that the church is the vehicle by which poverty is to be addressed. It will be promulgated by a people who want more than to be successful or effective in poverty relief, but who will also care deeply for and value their fellow man, and, like Christ, esteem him in such a way that if a poor man stood in their midst and communed with them, they nor anyone else would notice the slightest sign of poverty, including the man himself. Unfortunately, the system at work in America is one more focused on distributing resource to people than on realizing potential in people. Jordan Bowler, in a 2011 article titled "Commodifying Compassion," warns us that our aid campaigns that commodify compassion judge morality purely in quantitative terms. If we spend more on social concerns, we're deemed to be more compassionate, more just. And listen, charities, churches, and other not-for-profits can be as guilty to this charge of commodifying compassion as is the state welfare system. And together, they create what many refer to as a safety net. I call it a web of dependency, a snaring web. A friend and one of our instructors likens it to a piece of flypaper in an excellent manuscript titled "True Charity: Replacing Flypaper with Freedom." You can download this onto your phone. It is an excellent, challenging, and provocative read by Mike Mellon, who's here tonight, and he'll be out front, so you'll be able to gather some more information. He's got some cards. It's an easy thing to download. Robert Lupton, in his book Toxic Charity, describes how we can be as guilty as the state in sticking people in dependency. Give once, you create appreciation. Give twice, you elicit anticipation. Give 3 times, and you'll create expectation. If you give 4 times, you'll create an entitlement mentality. And if you give 5 times, you'll create dependency. Good sequence, isn't it? It's the safety net. And it catches man before he realizes his true need for change, and hence stops him short of ever searching for the one who can really change him. And so the poor whom we love, and for whom many of us in this room have given much, are held captive not by lock and shackle, but by the lure and dependency on a steady morphine-like drip of state largesse. This web that seems to hold man in place from rising or falling is more than an injustice against the poor, it's an injustice against all. Now hear me tonight. Its strands are crafted by we the people in what seems now a most obvious trespass against life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For it is by what Bastiat called legalized plunder that we construct its strands, each stretch of web representing that which was taken from some man or woman who, by their liberty, chose to give a little of their life in the form of work to pursue something they thought would make them happy. I would argue that this legislative process of plunder by which entitlement programs have swollen is one that is a trespass against God's natural intent and is therefore immoral. And I also argue that the church's acquiescence makes her guilty. And at the same time, that the church's repentance makes her the answer. The church is the answer. If immorality prevails in the land, the fault is ours in a great degree. If there is a decay of conscience, the pulpit is responsible for it. If the public press lacks moral discernment, the pulpit is responsible for it. If the world loses its interest in Christianity, the pulpit is responsible for it. If Satan rules in our halls of legislation, the pulpit is responsible for it. If our politics become so corrupt that the very foundations of our government are ready to fall away, the pulpit is responsible for it. Reverend Charles Finney, 1873. I think he also believed the church is the answer. The next time we are tempted to complain about the government, high taxes, waste, or fraud, we should instead realize the condition for our troubles has been created by the church, failing to live by God's standards, if not his commands. Those are the words of Eric Laverance this year in his book, Is Caesar Our Savior? Why Only the Church Can Keep Any Nation Free. And he'll lecture tonight. The church is the answer. We cannot separate morality, virtue, and personal integrity from life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is ironic that these unalienable rights, for which we did nothing to earn, still require diligence to retain and at times a fight to regain. And life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are tied to property rights. Consider what James Madison wrote in 1792 concerning property. That is not a just government, nor a property secure under it, where the property which a man has in his personal safety and personal liberty is violated by arbitrary seizures of one class of citizens for the service of the rest. If the United States mean to obtain or deserve the full praise due to wise and just governments, they will equally respect the rights of property and the property in rights. Simply put, what you earn, you should have the right to keep. What you buy should be yours for life. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there is a system now in place that trespasses this just notion as it grows every year. A system in which government taxes its citizens to support a welfare scheme that is failing. Let me share just a few numbers concerning the 2013 federal budget. You can find these at the Office of Management and Budget. You could probably just put that into a Google search engine. The initials are OMB. Of course, the numbers in red are so large, I often joke and say it ought to be called the OMG. But OMB it is for now. $3.5 trillion budget this next year, I think is what it is. Somebody could probably tell me exactly what that is. But 2/3 of that, which is about $2.2 trillion, will be spent on caring for the sick, the poor, the hungry, the elderly. We're expected to accumulate again in 2013 another $1 trillion of debt. Here's an interesting thought. If all evangelical Christians in the United States tithed 10%, nearly $1 trillion extra would be available for good works. Say caring for the poor, the sick, the elderly, and the hungry. And we just balanced the budget. The church is the answer. Eric's right. Caesar's not our Savior. The government is not able to solve the complex issues of poverty, often the result of spiritual and soulish issues for which God's people are uniquely equipped to heal. The church is the answer. Government, welfare cannot empower the poor, restore dignity, reconcile relationships, cannot bind up the brokenhearted, and cannot set the captive free. The church is the answer. The welfare system is failing, government charity isn't working, and we need to redefine what true charity really is. It's successful, it's born of faith, and it's just. Scripture teaches us that love or charity in 1 Corinthians 13 bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Charity never fails. True charity always succeeds. Not long ago, a homeless man named Paul came forward at a Friday chapel at our mission, and he was on his knees and weeping, and I knelt with him, and I grabbed hold of his arm, and I began to pray for him that he would be able to forgive his brother who had done something horrible to him 15 years ago that he had been holding on to. And I also prayed that he would find the grace to forgive himself for killing a man who was in a military conflict in the Middle East. And this is something that he'd held on to. Only true charity will bear with Paul, believe with Paul, hope for Paul, endure with Paul. True charity will not fail Paul. True charity succeeds because Christ's love is able to heal, empower, to restore, and set people like Paul on a solid foundation, something that welfare cannot do. And though handouts and benefits have done nothing long-lasting for him or millions of others, true charity will help him, but hold him accountable. Give to him, but require of him. Encourage him, and yet challenge him. True charity succeeds. And true charity is born of faith. In the opening of the Apostle Paul's letter to the Colossians, he expresses thankfulness for their faith, that their hope is laid up in heaven, and for the love that they have for their fellow man. There's a cause-effect relationship between faith and hope and love. Is not hope buried in faith? In the belief that these words of Christ are true, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again. Who can believe in those words and be without hope? And when our hope is set solidly in that life to come, that afterlife that paints this worldly existence as merely a vapor, then it sets us free from befriending the world and its ways. It sets us free from a consumerist mindset. It sets us free from lack, want, greed, envy, and materialism. True faith sets us free to exercise true charity for the sake of the poor, the sick, the elderly, and the hungry. With that boundless hope stemming from an unwavering faith, these radical statements by Christ, like, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it, or sell all that you have and give to the poor. These radical statements that seem unattainable suddenly become plausible. We cannot love and exercise true charity as God has intended us unless we really believe. And a lack of the charity that God calls us to is a sign of unbelief. True charity is effective charity only if it's born of real faith. And lastly, true charity is always just. Concerning charity and justice, few passages have affected me as much as this one. It's Deuteronomy. Oh, if I have it. It's not there. I'll have to read it. Deuteronomy 24:17, you shall not pervert the justice due a wanderer or an orphan, nor take a widow's garment in pledge. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I'm commanding you to do this thing. When you reap your harvest in your field, and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the wanderer or the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not go over it again. It shall be for the wanderer, for the orphan, and for the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this thing. Now, there are a number of things to glean from this passage concerning charity. However, for now, note that the instruction was to leave from your field, your vineyard, and your olive trees the remainder for the poor. We must understand today there is a form of charity that's a perversion of justice. It's one that operates by taking from one to give to another. And God said, when you reap your harvest in your field, leave a sheaf. When you gather your grapes from your field, leave the extra. The current welfare system of our nation is a perversion of justice in that it forcefully redistributes wealth and short-circuits true charity. Listen to these words of Pope Benedict from his 2009 encyclical, Caritas in Veritate, or Charity in Truth. That's good for tonight. Charity in truth, he says, charity goes beyond justice because to love is to give, to offer what is mine to the other, but it never lacks justice, which prompts us to give the other what is his, what is due to him by reason of his being or acting. I cannot give what is mine to the other without first giving him what pertains to him in justice. True charity cannot be found in taking from another man's field to feed the poor that come through our own. So tonight I ask you to dream with me of a community in which the local church is the voice for addressing issues of poverty, one in which the church is the source by which the hands of the poor are strengthened. Dream with me of a community that reestablishes the true meaning of charity, charity that is effective, that is born of faith, and that is always just. In summary, let me express how sad it is that in the well-intentioned effort of providing for the poor, we often hurt those we're trying to help while concomitantly sacrificing our liberty. For God's will and this nation's sake, may He irrevocably stamp on our hearts the vital urgency of this cause. And concerning it, when someone says to you, as they have to me, it's a David versus Goliath fight, just remind them of how the story goes.
Amen. Amen.
And then tell them, take up your sling and stone. 15 years ago, I was sorting through clothes to give to the poor, full of misguided compassion. Now I know it's not about clothing a body. It's about loving the soul that's in it. And it's not about a mission who understands this. It's about a God who wills it and a city who does it. And I must say, in review of the last 12 years of my life in ministry, had I known then what I know now, it is this very gathering, this very forum, that would have been the first thing that I would have ever done. Thank you.